Day 4 at the World Economic Forum. Do you know people are actually listening to our updates?
Of course they are. What do you think? I mean, this is Biz News TV.
Exactly. And Alec, I want to start with something that I did today, which I have never done before. I saw Maria Bartiromo. Now, for those of you who don't know Maria Bartiromo, she is the money honey. She was sitting quietly outside of one of the plenary sessions, and I was brave enough to go and ask her for a selfie. So I have a selfie with Maria Bartiromo.
So now you got every CEO listed company on the New York Stock Exchange saying, I wish it was me.
Exactly. And then I've got another beautiful story for you, is that there is a South African company called Africa Teen Geeks, Lindiwe Matladi. And in 2020, she won the Klaus Schwab Social Innovation Foundation Award. You have never seen a star shooting like this. At this World Economic Forum, as a result of winning that award, she has met the Queen of Belgium, Queen Matilda, and one-on-one session with Queen Matilda. She also had a whole press conference dedicated to Africa Teen Geeks. This is in the education space into digitization. So I just thought, what a great story of success for a South African company. And to all of you that are lambasting us about the World Economic Forum, there is some tangible evidence of what actually can happen.
And go and have a look on the forum's podcasts. And there's a really good podcast with Lindiwe from, it's called Teen Geeks. Wow, just an example of the kind of talent that exists in our country, entrepreneurial talent, which is breaking through sometimes despite all the obstacles. She's another example of it.
Well, I've got an Africa agenda, but I know that your agenda is always much bigger than mine. You're global. So tell me what has stood out since I last spoke to you.
Okay, now the business community have got a lot of concern about the Pfizer vaccine. So I made it my case to get closer to Pfizer. I had a very small session with Angela Huang, who's head of global, I think, distribution for Pfizer. She is South African. She was raised in Port Elizabeth, went to school in Empangeni, and here she's this big deal at Pfizer. Very impressive, very nice and easy, and gave some good insights. We can't go into them in too much detail now, but what I can tell you was that they continued to say to us, look, we've got all this data. The data is showing us that the vaccines have really worked well, but we really don't know the impact of long COVID. And then I went to a small session with Albert Bourla, who's the chief executive of Pfizer, and it was the same story. We don't know what COVID is going to have, the impact of it in the long term, and I guess by the same token, we don't really know what we're in for. But the reality of it is that the company did the best that it could at the time. It made the vaccine come out in 8 months, which would normally take 8 years. They think they saved the world. I don't know if they saved the world, but certainly they did help a lot of people from not getting really sick and not dying.
What soundbite from Angela stands out?
Don't know.
Well, you can think about it, and then I'm going to come back.
You naughty.
Don't you do that to people? Don't you do that to people? Yes. You see, I've got to give you some of your own medicine here. It's very different being on the other side of the mic. Now, Africa. So there have been a couple of sessions deep diving into Africa and about realizing the Africa opportunity. Of course, I'm a big proponent of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which, if we get it right, unlocks that $3.4 trillion free trade area, making it the largest in the world. And I think that Africa is really uniting behind that story because, of course, this is about collaboration in a fragmented world. And as Africa, hopefully we are coming together. And just a couple of stats out there. We have the youngest continent. We have the fastest growing continent. We have huge opportunity for renewable energy. And then, of course, an abundance of minerals and resources. All we need to do is understand how to beneficiate. So that's been the focus on Africa this afternoon.
No, and it's huge. The free trade area, can you imagine Europe, if they still had barriers between their countries, what a difference it would be in the European Union, whereas in Africa, we've got these barriers. If you want to, well, you fly a lot, Bron. If you want to get to Rwanda, how do you get there nowadays? Can you fly straight from Johannesburg?
You can. In fact, it is a 4-hour flight from Johannesburg, maybe 4.5 hours. The only thing is that is at 2 o'clock in the morning. and it's a tough flight to stay awake for. So, I mean, it's brilliant that we can get from Johannesburg to Rwanda. I'm not complaining at all, but it would be great if we could see more of that from country to country on the continent and not going to Paris and then back in onto the continent.
That was my point. Obviously, I picked the wrong example, but the point is that if Africa can start collaborating more, South African businesses who at the moment have got bloody noses every time they've gone north of the Limpopo will start seeing, hang on, there is an opportunity here. But there's just so many barriers at the moment. This free trade story, how long have they been working on it?
So it was just before COVID, and I think they went live, and I stand to be corrected, but it could have been 2019. And then COVID hit and obviously delayed everything. So we're now trying to play catch up, but I do believe that everybody is quite excited about this collaboration and the opportunity that it'll unlock for us. Within, I mean, intra-Africa trade is still only sitting at about 14, 15% or 17%, depending on what metric you actually look at. So, yeah, I think big things are happening. And again, the one thing that always strikes me when I'm here is that South Africa, and obviously now carving that out of the African story, gosh, we have a beautiful country. We have a beautiful country, Alec.
And we have challenges, but so does everybody else. But I can't leave without telling you about the guy that I saw this morning, probably the most impressive CEO I have seen in many a year. I don't know how to say his second name, but his first name is Kara whatever. He's a CEO of Uber. He's Iranian. It's interesting that, aren't you seeing many of the cross countries? For instance, there's a Scottish woman who runs Citibank nowadays. There's an Irishman who runs UBS of Switzerland. But he was telling Uber is now the biggest employer in the world, employs 5 million people. And he said it's really good that the Uber drivers are getting more money because it means that they're getting a better quality of life, and they're also giving them a slipstream through to the company. He was just superb. Quick one-liners, made a few jokes. He gave the interviewer a little bit of a rough time, which I quite like sometimes. But
really? You like giving the interviewee a bit of a rough time?
No, I like to see the interviewer being put on their back foot, because it's great. It makes it a more level play. And then you can see there isn't any collusion or collaboration before. This is a man who runs a great company, and it's a company it's in our business portfolio. So obviously I had to go along and see him. But while I was not that impressed with the Pfizer CEO, I'm hugely impressed with the Uber one.
So I must say that maybe you need to go to lessons for him for the one-liners, for the sound bites. We're going to try that again tomorrow. You know that. You better be ready with your sound bite, Mr. Hogg. Well, that's it from our side. Day 4 at the World Economic Forum here in Davos. Bronwyn, Nielsen
and Alec Hogg.
We're reporting for BizNews, the Nielsen network, in collaboration with Brand South Africa.